When you work with decimals, it's the same rules as with your integers, your positive and your negative, even when you're adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. All the rules we've already talked about for this chapter still apply, even though now that we are working with decimals. And so, first one, when you're adding integers, remember our rules here. If they have the same signs, you added the absolute value and then kept a sign. If they were different signs, you subtracted the absolute value and took the value of the largest, or took the sign of the largest absolute value. So when we look at this, they have different signs, and since they're different signs and going opposite ways on the number line, then we are going to subtract the two. When you subtract, you always put the largest number on top. And when you're adding and subtracting, you have to line up the decimals. So just look at the number, the absolute value of the numbers. You do not have to think about the negative right now. Okay? You can add in a 0 to fill in the space here, and we're subtracting. Can't do 0 minus 3, so we have to borrow. So 10 minus 3 is 7. 5 minus 4 is 1. You bring your decimal straight down. 3 minus 0 is 3. And then remember, when they're different signs, keep the sign of the greatest absolute value. 3.6 is the greatest absolute value, and since that's negative, our answer is going to be negative. So negative 3.17. Now, when we're subtracting, again, rules still apply. Our rule for this was to add the opposite. Remember, first number stays the same, subtraction turns to addition, and whatever the number is, it changes to the opposite. So if it's positive, it goes negative, negative, it goes positive. So when we look at this, whenever you add the opposite, you always want to rewrite the problem. Negative 18.278, add the opposite. Now, when we're looking at this, now that we're adding, you have to think, okay, when I'm adding and I have, now I'd cross this out even. So I'm not looking at that one anymore. Now that I have different signs, again, same as right above, you're going to subtract. Largest number goes on top, and you do have to line up the decimal places. And again, I'm adding in zeros to fill in the rest of the spots. 8 minus 0 is 8, 7 minus 0 is 7, 2 minus 8 we can't do, we have to borrow. So 12 minus 8, 4, 7 minus 6, 1, and your 1 comes straight down. And when you do this, you have to keep that decimal point right where it is. And the largest absolute value was the 18.278, and that was negative, so our answer is negative. So it's negative 11.478 is our answer for that one. Okay? When we're multiplying with decimals, again, same rules. Our rules were if they're the same signs, positive, positive, negative, negative, it's going to be a positive answer. Different signs, one positive and one negative, the answer is going to be negative. So right away here, we can already decide what the answer will be. And the answer, since there's two negatives, they're the same, it's going to be a positive answer. And then you guys have learned multiplying decimals in the past, and what you do is you do not have to line up the decimals, and actually whichever number has the most numbers I usually put on top. So 4.87 and then 5.5. And when you do this, if you would have to add in a 0 like we did up here, remember you have to keep those decimal places lined up and you have to count all of those at the end. Multiply like normal. 7 times 5 is 35. 8 times 5 is 40 plus 3. 5 times 4 is 20 plus 4. Before you go down to the next row, you always have to add a 0. And then it just repeats actually. 5 times 7, since it's the same number, is 35. brought your 3 up. 8 times 5 is 40, plus 3 is 43. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 4 is 24. Then you have to add all these numbers up. 5 plus 0 is 5. 8, 7, 6, and 2. Now, our answer is not 26,785. So what you need to do to put your decimal place is you have to count how many decimal places there are. So I have 1, 2, 3. How many numbers there are after the decimal place, or to the right of the decimal place. And this is, again, where I said if you added zeros in, you're going to have to count those zeros as well. Then what you do is, starting from the right, you move over those amount of spots, 2, 3. That's where you would put your decimal place. So it's going to be a positive, and I'm going to move the positive down here, positive 26.785 would be our answer for that one. And the last one, when you're dividing. And again, your division rules are the same thing as your multiplication rules. Same thing. So in this one, we have a positive and a negative. Since we have two different signs, we know our answer is already going to be a negative number. And for this, you have to do long division. 9.96. First number always goes in the box. Second number always goes on the outside. And when you do this problem, it's really hard to divide by 0.2 because we don't know our multiplication factor for 0.2 very well. And so we want to make it into a whole number. You move it as many times over as you need to make it a whole number. Or however many times you moved it here, you have to move it underneath. And I go ahead and put that up right away so I know where it's going to be. So how many 2's go into 9? Well, there's 4 because 2 times 4 is 8. When you subtract your numbers, you have 1, bring down the next number. How many 2's go into 19? And that's going to be 9 because 9 times 2 is 18. Again, subtract your number, bring down the last one. 6, how many 2's go into 16? And it's 8, and that works out evenly. If you would need to, you can always add a 0 at the end and bring it down. Say if I would have had a 1 at the end here, I could have wrote a 0, brought it down, it would have been 10. Okay, but we didn't need to on this one. And again, this was going to be a negative answer, so it's negative 49.8. A lot of people struggle with decimals, especially when we have positive and negative and we have all 4 operations. So if you have any more questions on these, please come in and talk to me about them.